Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here, and there is yet more breaking news in regards to this very, very bizarre case in Utah. There's a new article up at the Last American Vagabond by Derek Bros that I had the privilege of reading last night, where he's going to go through some of the new charges that have been waged against Hamblin. And these, I believe, are 6 additional charges. We're going to go over a whistleblower, somebody who claims to not only have known Hamblin through her ex-husband, but that he had admitted that he had committed some of these crimes in the past, and then go over where he thinks the case may go from here. His name is Derek Bros. He's the founder of the Conscious Resistance. Derek, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing good, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that somebody is keeping up on this case and going even beyond the charges that are being reported in the mainstream media. So, for my audience who may be new, some new Red Voice Media people, or some people that saw me on the Reawaken America tour, let's go back to the original investigation that led to no charges, but a case without prejudice, meaning that charges could be filed in the future.
Yeah, so there is a man named David Hamblin. He is a former I guess he was a licensed therapist, a clinical psychologist in the state of Utah, and before that in New York. And as you said, in 2012, he was arrested and he was facing several different charges of child abuse, of rape, of sodomy, some really disturbing things. And these charges were coming from his own children, as well as other people, a couple of his own children, as well as other alleged victims. And so when that arrest took place, testimony was given. There was a number of witnesses who came forward and provided victim statements. And then again, the case would be dismissed in 2014. Dismissed without prejudice is what it's known as. And so what that means is that the case was not dismissed because Mr. Hamblin was found to be not guilty of the charges or because there was a lack of evidence or anything of that sort. It was simply, there was more of like a kind of administrative situation going on. And basically what was happening is somebody was dragging their feet and the necessary documents they needed to prosecute the case weren't able to get in time. So eventually the court was forced to let Hamblin go. So he was released in 2014. That was a pre-existing situation. And then fast forward to this year, June 2022, late May, the Utah County Sheriff's Office announces an investigation into what they call ritualistic sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, all right? And that's all we heard first from the sheriffs, and then it kind of set off a whole other chain of events. I don't know if you want to jump right into that.
No, I absolutely do want to jump into that chain of events, and you've documented it in previous articles over at the Last American Vagabond. Sort of out of nowhere, you had this character, David Levitt, that was apparently part of this earlier investigation, make some startling, I would say, denials on camera about what this investigation into Hamblin and others currently may be about, Derek?
Yeah, so the interesting thing here, so the case we mentioned about David Hamblin in 2012, dismissed in 2014, when the Utah sheriffs announced this new investigation into ritualistic child sexual abuse, they didn't make any mention of David Hamblin. So there's no, at the time, we didn't know there was any connection. But the only reason his name came into the conversation is because the next day after that sheriff's announcement, David Levitt, who is the Utah County attorney, the top cop in the county, brother of former governor of Utah, and father's also a very powerful man. He comes out and holds his own press conference and says, hey, I'm going to be named in this investigation. It's all politically motivated, because at that time the Utah primaries were a few weeks away. And so he was saying, this is, them coming after me. And, by the way, it's worth noting, these are all Republicans, right? So this is like an internal, like, oh, these Republicans are coming after me.
Whoa, Derek, what are you talking about? This wasn't satanic adrenochrome blood drinking Democrats? Wait a minute. Whoa.
This time.
Whoa, Derek. My goodness. Now we're getting a little wild. I mean, I thought the stuff that we were talking about before seemed a little wacky, but now they're Republicans? Oh my goodness. Continue.
Yeah, so whatever people think about the parties, in this case, all these officials were part of the Republican Party. So David Levitt holds a press conference, says, "Look, this investigation that was just announced by the sheriffs, it's aimed at coming after me. This is politically motivated." And he provides the press this 151-page document that was labeled Victim Statement Number 3, and he says, this statement in here, it lists me and my wife, and it accuses us of being cannibals, of pedophiles, of some really disturbing things. And he's like, I'm here to say we're not cannibals, we're not pedophiles. And everybody's sort of like, what? Where did this come from? And the documents that he was listing, the 151-page victim statement, is from the 2012 case against David Hamblin, where one of the victims, we don't know if it was his daughter, one of his daughters, or one of the other victims, does name David Levitt and his wife, and accuse them of being involved in this cult that was doing this sexual abuse. So after that, the sheriff has another press conference and basically says, hey, we don't know what he's talking about. We haven't named any suspects. We didn't name Levitt. We didn't name Hamblin. We're not commenting on an ongoing investigation. And so that's where things were the beginning of the summer. And so that was what started. First, of course, you reported on it, and I started doing some deep dives and doing a series of investigations. It's turned into about 7 articles now, looking at this case, looking at the history of abuse in Utah, the history of abuse related to the Mormon Church. And then just in September, David Hamblin was actually arrested. And that's when we could confirm, hey, okay, he is involved in this case. And it wasn't from, I want to make it clear, it's not the same charges at the moment, same people from the 2012 case. These are new victims who have come forward. And so that was the original, the new case, September. He gets arrested on, I think, 16 charges, maybe. I mean, even reading the charges is just disturbing enough for anybody who
you know what. Before we get there, I want to get a timeline. Okay, so let's roll it back again, because all this stuff just seems so wild and unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And on one end of it, I feel bad even making jokes about political parties because of the veracity and serious nature of these allegations. Because if they are indeed true, they are some of the most grotesque, inhumane, unbelievable things you could do to human beings, especially children. Now, this case really seems to stem from abuse that was taking place late 80s, early 90s. These new charges that were just filed, I believe, within the week are from the early 90s. And when we get to David Hamblin in particular, we are talking about things like hypnosis. We were talking about things like filming children, and then also making claims about being the reincarnation of deities such as Jesus Christ and prophets such as Joseph Smith. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so there's definitely, David Hamblin is definitely an interesting character, but yeah, so this situation has been the investigation that the sheriffs announced was looking at, as you said, abuse taking place from 1990 till up to 2010. So that was like the scope of their investigation. And I actually just spoke to Sergeant Spencer Cannon of the Utah Sheriff's Office just today when we put out our latest investigation. He said that they've had now at this point more than 150 tips coming in since they announced this investigation originally in June, in late May, and that's 150 from different victims, and he said also from people telling them about other victims that they're aware of. And so this is going pretty far back, and it's also coming more recent. So what we know now after David Hamblin was first arrested is that once that first arrest, and this is typically how things happen, after the persecutor, the predator is arrested, other people tend to feel safe to come out and say, hey, like, I was abused by him as well. So now another victim has come forward, and that's what these latest charges that have taken place, which is an additional 6 charges. I have the press release here. It was on October 18th, so just about 10 days ago. And again, these are very, disturbing. This is from a different county in Utah, a different area. This is in Spring City, Utah in the 1990s. So it's showing you that David Hamblin was active in different areas. The victim disclosed to detectives that David Hamblin made the victim masturbate him. They disclosed that he was forcibly sexually abused the victim, that he gave them some sort of religious blessing during some of these quote unquote therapy sessions. And they apparently have tried to bring their abuse forward, it says, but it wasn't taken seriously. And basically this is because of, it specifically said, because of Hamblin's standing, because of his membership in and involvement with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's from the sheriff's department's press release at the announcement of these charges. So I think that's an interesting component here. There's definitely some part of the church that I think we should be talking about as well, because the Mormon Church, even in the mainstream press, the Associated Press, the last couple months did an investigation about their helpline, and the latest story I'm covering today that we'll get into in a bit also involves somebody who tried to go to the Mormon Church and go through the helpline and got no help, and then eventually went to David Hamblin for help.
Yeah, which is just so disturbing that he was supposed to be in a position in which he was helping people with their sexual abuse and other mental issues, when in fact he's now being accused of this on a massive level. And one of the aspects of your story is that one of the alibis or explanations for this is Hamblin saying that he was going through a bad divorce. And the whistleblower in which you use eventually divorces her husband. And kind of at the crescendo of your article, she claims that she believes that her husband may also be named in this investigation eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is a new piece of this story that is actually just breaking today. We just released it this afternoon at the Last American Vagabond. And again, as I told you with the previous stories, I emailed this story to all the local media in Salt Lake City and Utah and all the major counties, including Adam Herberts, who's been the only real local mainstream journalist to report on this. And I think he probably will follow up with this. So I'm hoping we'll get more coverage. But what the story involves is a woman named Kate Talley, who contacted me a few months ago when she saw the reporting I was doing on this situation. And she contacted me and said, I knew David Hamblin. I have some things I want to share with you. So we began corresponding, and she's now decided to come forward publicly. And so this article was published at the Last American Vagabond today. You can read her story, you can read her words, but also we included a 45-minute interview that I did just yesterday with her, where she comes forward in her own words and outlines a lot of this. This is going to be the first of two parts because, as I said a moment ago, what got her connected to the story is she was seeking help from her. She was a member of the Mormon Church. She claimed she'd been ritually abused as a child by members of her family and people involved in the Mormon Church. That's going to be the second part of our article. We're going to go deeper into that, like what actually she says happened to her as a child. So when she tried to go to the church, both as in her early 20s and then later on, as in seeking help as an adult, she didn't get the help she was looking for. First the church, they listened. She said she did have a sympathetic bishop that, heard what she had to say and said, all right, let me get back in touch with you in 2 weeks, and came back and basically said, we don't have resources for people like you. We don't have resources for people who've been sexually abused in the church or by members of their family. We just, don't know what to do. And so, eventually she was just dissatisfied with the whole thing and she decided to leave the church. But obviously she was still dealing with a lot of that trauma and a lot of that, pain and all that stuff. And especially because the really disturbing thing she tells me in this interview is that after she, tells the bishop what's going on, the church basically said, well, I guess in the Mormon Church, at the age of 8, it's considered to be the age of accountability, and you're responsible for things you do after that. And so they're saying, well, if you participated in certain things after the age of 8, you're going to have to come, tell the High Council, and basically be held accountable for the things that you participated in after that age of accountability, basically for her own abuse. She would be held accountable in the church in some way. So she chose to leave. And eventually, she would marry this man, Eldon Talley, and have several children with him. And she started to seek help. And it was through her ex-husband, Eldon Talley, and his sister-in-law. They knew this man, David Hamblin, and said, well, we think you should go see him. She started to see David Hamblin and participate in these, what he calls healing circles. And that's when she said her ex-husband, fell under the influence of David Hamblin and basically started to kind of drive a wedge between the two of them and started to do a number of horrible things, like from cutting her off financially to humiliating her in front of the group of people in this healing circle, which she said basically acted like a cult that David Hamblin was kind of running and grooming her husband to be, in the leadership, I guess you could say. And humiliation.
Let's stop it there. Let's talk about that cult-like aspect of it, because I think that's really important, right? You have this person who supposedly is helping people through their mental trauma. He's coming from, I believe, Cornell in New York, amongst other places. It's mentioned that he has to leave Cornell for some other type of scandal. But then what I really found interesting was that not only did he claim to be the reincarnations of Jesus and then Joseph Smith, but also a murderer and a criminal. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so he, I don't have the name in front of me, but he claimed to be the reincarnation of Joseph Smith's essentially his bulldog, his bodyguard. It was what's his name? I can't recall it right now, but he's well known in not in just Utah history, but in Mormon history for having been an enforcer. And in the early days of the Mormon Church, when they were having to fight, I guess, for their right to practice their beliefs, and there was I mean, what I find interesting, and I've said this in the beginning, this is not an anti-Mormon thing, but I will also say I'm increasingly becoming convinced after doing this reporting investigation for the last 6 months that the Mormon Church is a cult. That even though there are probably good people clearly involved to different degrees or who believe in it and have faith, that I think from the beginning, from the outset, Joseph Smith and a lot of this history, looking into it, the polygamy, the child marriage, the blood atonement. I mean, it's there from the beginning, right? And then there's a lot of Freemasonry symbols involved in the Mormon rituals. But I say that all to say this man, his right-hand man, was a murderer, was somebody who is historically documented for having killed people in defense of the Mormon Church. And I'm sure, maybe sometimes it was self-defense, but apparently it went beyond that. He has a pretty wild reputation, this man, that David Hamblin also claimed to be the reincarnation of.
So Hamblin himself, according to your eyewitness, your whistleblower, your abuse victim, although not abused by Hamblin, he did admit to being guilty of some of the things he had been previously accused of, correct?
Yeah, so Kate says that just so the situation is that when she gets involved in the healing circle, for a while she's participating in it, but she starts to feel like things aren't right. But at this point, she says she was very much under the thumb of her ex-husband, and he was pretty much under the influence of David Hamblin. And she's there at the time in 2012 when he's arrested, and she actually attended, she said, at least 7, maybe 8 of the different hearings that took place, until Hamblin would eventually be released and the case would be dismissed without prejudice. So she was there throughout that entire incident, and it was her husband who was largely financially supporting David Hamblin while he was in behind bars. And she says that, yes, like in their little cult community circle, they all saw it as like, oh, it's just his ex-wife getting in the minds of his daughters and trying to make them say these evil things about him. And so she said when he was, found where this case was dismissed, it was like he was exonerated, he was celebrating, but at the same time, he did admit to having abused his clients before, hypnotizing them. And she said also within the group that what she described like some form of hypnosis where like the meetings would start with David Hamblin lighting like a candle and saying, this candle represents this specific thing, and then maybe opening up with some kind of prayer and having people repeat the words after him and different things. So I think that they're, especially if they are looking up him and he's claiming that he had some Mexican native like elder. She said, Kate said she's never actually seen this person, but this is his story. It could just be, somebody playing plastic shaman. Here I am. I got a native elder that told me this and that. And then he just uses that to abuse people, to get people in vulnerable positions, is what it sounds like. But yeah, so she was there throughout that whole time, and she says that he did admit to having abused his clients, but that he said his sexual energy was off or something like that, but that he had repented and all was good now.
So let's talk about not only the cult leader stuff, but how that leads us into the idea that, look, these charges are real now. We do have a history of, like you said, the Mormon Church engaging in these types of activities at the highest levels, according to eyewitnesses, via the Gordon B. Hinckley scandal. What do you think is next? Do you believe that Tally's ex-husband will, in fact, be charged? Do you think that Levitt may be charged? Is there anything new on the fronts of what you said Adam Hurwitz, the only mainstream reporter out there, has been putting out?
Well, I'm hoping that with what Kate is putting forward today, and again, I encourage everybody to go read the article. It's at The Last American Vagabond. This is part 1 of Kate's story. This is a former associate of David Hamblin and also somebody who survived ritualistic sexual abuse at the hands of family members who are members of the Mormon Church, coming forward now publicly for the first time. And I want to just tell Kate again how brave and how strong she has been through this, and I appreciate her being willing to do this and share her story with me. I do think there will be more arrests, and in fact, again, earlier earlier today, Sergeant Spencer Cannon, he didn't give me any insight to what is actually going on in the investigation, but he said there's definitely more to come for sure. He said, the first victim that came for Hamblin was more recent. And then after that arrest, another one took place. And as I told Kate when she was sharing her story with me, the more people who go public and share what they know, then obviously it's going to make more people feel more comfortable, feel like, hey, something's actually being done here. And look, I don't know Sergeant Spencer Cannon or Sheriff Mike Smith personally or any of the other officers or at the Utah County Sheriff's Office, but they sure seem to be committed to this investigation. The fact that we have one arrest now and we have multiple sets of charges going against David Hamblin. And look, if the daughters of David Hamblin, who accused him in 2012, do decide to come forward and say that they want to share their testimony again, or if those charges become connected to this current investigation, then at that point, all bets are off, because then that brings in the documents that do name David Levitt, the documents that name Gordon Bowden, the so-called Punisher, and all the other people that are named in those documents would then become potentially suspects, right? Because if those testimonies are to be believed, then you would think in a real investigation, those people would be called in at the very least to be questioned. And David Levitt at that point would then need to, provide, I guess, some sort of alibi or be able to defend himself against these charges. I think if that's going to take place, if Levitt is going to be brought down, my guess, maybe for political reasons, and I think we talked about this last time, it probably won't be till he's out of office. But we're coming up on November right here, so that's just November, December, and January. He's no longer Utah County Attorney. So that could happen. And Kate also said that she thinks her husband could be somehow implicated in this. She doesn't know that, and I want to make that clear because, this is a real – Kate and her family and Eldon Talley, these are real people. Their children are dealing with this, and I want to make it clear not everybody in the family thinks that this story should be coming out, right, and thinks that this is the appropriate way to do things. But Kate is sharing her story because she thinks more victims need to feel the strength to come forward and share their stories. So that's why I'm supporting her. But she believes that there could be more charges. And I also want to say, just to make it clear, I did contact Eldon Talley. I emailed him. He didn't give me any specific quote. He did say, hey, thanks for letting me know. He said he's a fan of my work. I don't know how that works. I didn't know that. But he didn't provide me any statement. I told him what the article was going to say and what his wife accuses him, because it's not just humiliation. It's not just, oh, he cut her out of the accounts and he kicked her out of the bedroom. There's also physical and sexual abuse, because Hamblin was instructing her ex-husband to reenact her traumas that she had gone through as a child and to physically do them again as some way to heal her. So I just want to make that clear. That is what she's saying. And Eldon Talley was given a chance to respond. He has not so far said anything.
Fascinating, bizarre, beyond horrific if true. These are just a few of the things I can say about this case. And we're not just talking about people with power in the Mormon Church. If Levitt is in fact charged, like you said, he is in the upper echelons of Utah's state government apparatus, and like you said, brother of the former governor there. These go to the highest levels of power. The story really has not been covered nationally. It is only in the local news. I have yet to come across this on an evening talk show or broadcast on any of the major networks. Am I wrong in that assumption?
No, I haven't seen anything either. I mean, it's been some of the Utah media basically kind of parroting each other, and Adam Herbert's trying to actually him and his investigative team digging deeper than some of the other locals. Myself, but I'd seen no national coverage other than the two hit pieces from NBC News trying to, this is all satanic panic, QAnon, and basically trying to get people to sympathize with David Levitt. And that's what's funny or sad, is that was before Hamblin was actually arrested. And since then, they have not corrected their story. It's still up. So anybody who reads it thinks this case is just some, QAnon nonsense.
And these cases, again, are for things that took place well before the QAnon nonsense, have nothing to do with the Democrats or adrenochrome or the narratives in which the media have amplified, and instead have gone into dark reaches I think most of us would hope are not real and only the things of horror films. And yet now we're having real arrests and real developments and more charges and more whistleblowers coming forward. I don't know how much this yarn ball can unravel. As you know, whenever you have people at this level of power, it seems like certain things are cut off. You said before, feet were dragged, certain things were not filed. It was looked at in the future. I really hope this goes somewhere. I think it's moving in the right direction. I also think if we see a second arrest, then we can be assured that there is at least a good driving force behind this. But unfortunately, in the past, we already know the people being accused have vast resources. For instance, you mentioned that Tally's ex-husband was paying for Hamblin's defense fund to what she believes is the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, I know that Derek Bros and Jason Bermas don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend on any type of a defense fund. Do you think that's eventually going to come into play? And if more arrests are made, what chance do we have at justice seeing some of these people still have vast financial resources and are connected to powerful people behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely some church. There's some connections to the Mormon Church, just even from the simple fact that nearly all of these people, every person that we've mentioned, David Hamblin, he was excommunicated from the church after his arrest. David Levitt, a member of the church, that's how they knew each other. Kate, ex-member of the church. I mean, there's those connections, right? And the Mormon Church, as I've said in previous interviews, has vast amounts of wealth. I think really it's hard for maybe some of us who have only grown up in the last 20, 30, 40 years to really understand how quick the Mormon Church has grown to become one of the fastest growing religions. But in the 70s and the 80s, around the time when we were that documentary was being made about Gordon B. Hinckley, there were still many people who saw it as kind of like a small, weird cult more than a religion. But they, under the leadership of Gordon B. Hinckley, they remade themselves in the media and have grown massively. And again, this is not about hating on anybody who's a member of that church. I'm just saying the church has definitely gone to an effort to try to change their image in the public to make it, like, oh, don't talk about the blood atonement and all those weird things in the past and that's just quirky things. And you can look up the interview between Mike Wallace and Gordon B. Hinckley and kind of see the way he's sort of trying to remake their image and talk down some of the weirder elements of Mormonism. So they're vastly powerful. I've mentioned before too that they own most of the land in the United States, the unowned private held land. It's owned by the church. And maybe just behind Bill Gates. I'm sure Bill Gates owns more than them, but they're definitely a major landholder. So those are powerful connections that we should know about. And then of course the Levitt family, whatever David Levitt is up to with his foundation in Ukraine, I think is a part of this that I plan to dig on sooner, and I'm hoping we get more information about that. Now, as far as more arrests, if a second arrest is made, like you said, that would give me some hope, okay, there's more to this. Now, the concern or the fear is that it's just going to all be, I'm glad there's more charges coming for Hamblin. Like, let's put Hamblin away for the rest of his life. Like, right, this guy is guilty of all kinds of things, and I hope it all comes out and it's enough to bury him under the prison. But if it's all dumped on him, knowing, again, what we've seen in these documents from 2012 and these other names that are mentioned, including David Levitt, including some of these other folks, one of them who's connected to a marketing firm that does a lot of work for big firms and famous people out there, if none of those people are ever questioned, then it just sort of gets thrown to the dustbin, then I think we won't be seeing, full justice. That's what I'm concerned about.
No, I'm concerned about the same thing, and that's why we're following up on this. And that's why we're talking to you, Derek, because you're doing the seminal work on this. It's over at The Last American Vagabond right now. Kate Story, former associate of David Hamblin, survivor of ritual abuse in Utah, comes forward. This is part one. How else can people support you other than checking out the articles and really the vast work you've done on this subject, ritualistic abuse in the past, the finders, even spreading your wings out to more global ideas with the World Economic Forum and beyond?
Well, I appreciate this, brother, having me on. And again, thanks to Kate for coming forward. If anybody out there wants to support my work and effort on this, I would love for you to go to a crowdfunding campaign I have running right now. I'm actually just for the next few days running a crowdfunding campaign, trying to finish the last 5 episodes of the Pyramid of Power documentary series, which I've talked with you about before. The pyramidofpower.net is where you can find the documentary series. the crowdfunding campaign. It's on my Twitter page right now. It's pinned at the top. So if you go check out my Twitter account, or if you can share that, brother, anybody can check that. Also, just go to theconsciousresistance.com. You'll see a video right on the front page of me explaining. There's some perks we're offering. There's some cool things, but ultimately that's the main way to help me right now. I want to finish this series. I want it to be put out, and people have already told me that they've used the episodes we released, the 12 episodes we've released so far, to homeschool their kids, to share with family, and to get friends who won't watch more than a 20-30 minute video to check this out. So, if you want to help me create this tool to wake up more people, then please contribute to that campaign.
And we hope they do. Derek, you're welcome anytime here. And when I start up the Red Voice Media weekly show, we're going to have you back on and go over even more of your work, because we have been spending a lot of time on this case, because nobody else has. But there's a lot of other things to be talking about. And your Greater Reset tour, that's been great as well. So we wish you the best, my friend.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
All right. Derek Bros, there he is, The Conscious Resistance, the last American vagabond. You want to support this broadcast? One of the best ways to do so is check me out over at Rockfin. $9.99 a month, or $99.99 for the year. You hit subscribe. It's like a Netflix for creators. You want more Jason Bermas? We're going to give you more Jason Bermas over at Red Voice Media. We've got exclusives every single Friday. Thomas Renz, 1 hour. The lawsuit with DARPA, EcoHealth, and beyond is the latest and greatest. Try it out for just $1 for the first month. And again, we're running the tests Monday through Thursday, 4 days a week. We're going to be 8 a.m., 10 a.m. Eastern. I can't wait to get down like a clown Charlie Brown on that. We're uncensored on Rumble. Another great way is just to follow me, subscribe over there. I'm a documentary filmmaker, Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, and Shade the Motion Picture. Please watch them. Please share them. And if you want to financially support me in another way, consider buying me a coffee. The links are down below. Guys, I love you. It's not about left or right. It's always about right and